The most dangerous people aren't strangers in dark alleys. They're the ones who smile at family dinners, while systematically destroying your confidence. They know exactly which words will cut deepest because they've been studying your vulnerabilities for years. And when they finally strike, they do it with such precision that everyone else thinks they're just being helpful. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, because today's story is about the moment. I realize that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones trying to tear you down from the inside. My name is Camden Walsh. I am 32 years old, and I live in Burlington, Vermont, where the mountains frame our historic downtown like a postcard that never quite captures the real beauty of this place. The cobblestone streets and Victorian architecture create a backdrop that feels both timeless and intimate, the kind of setting where you'd expect family bonds to be sacred and unbreakable. I married my husband Marcus 4 years ago, and we have 2 children together, Ivy, who just turned 5, and Lincoln, who's 3. Marcus works in sustainable energy consulting, traveling frequently to wind farms and solar installations across New England. When he's home, he's completely present. The kind of father who builds elaborate pillow forts and reads bedtime stories in different character voices. But his job keeps him away more than I'd like, leaving me to navigate the complex dynamics of his family, largely on my own. Marcus comes from what I initially thought was a close-knit family. His mother, Constance, is a retired high school principal who ran her school with an iron fist for 37 years. She's the type of woman who still corrects adults' grammar and believes that structure and discipline are the foundation of good character. His father, Gerald, is a quiet man who learned long ago that it's easier to nod and agree than to challenge his wife's opinions. They live in a sprawling colonial house in Shelbourne, just 15 minutes from our downtown apartment, close enough that Constance can drop by whenever she feels the need to check in. From the moment Marcus and I got engaged, I sensed that Constance saw me as a temporary fixture in her son's life. She never said it directly, but her comments had a way of making me feel like I was auditioning for a role I'd never quite be qualified for. When I was pregnant with Ivy, she'd make observations about my prenatal vitamins, my exercise routine, my choice to continue working as a freelance graphic designer. Each comment was wrapped in maternal concern, but underneath was an unmistakable message. I wasn't measuring up to her standards. The pattern intensified after Ivy was born. Constance would arrive unannounced with bags of baby supplies, explaining that she'd found better brands or safer alternatives to whatever I'd chosen. She'd reorganize my diaper bag, relocate my burp cloths, and suggest different feeding schedules. When I tried to establish boundaries, she'd remind me that she'd raised 3 successful children and had decades of experience that I was foolish to ignore. Marcus, caught between his mother's strong personality and his new role as a husband and father, often defaulted to keeping the peace. He'd validate my feelings in private but rarely confronted his mother directly. This dynamic created a triangle where I felt increasingly isolated and criticized, while Constance maintained her position as the family's ultimate authority on child rearing. The situation became more complicated when Lincoln was born. Constance's involvement increased exponentially, and her criticism became more pointed. She questioned my decision to breastfeed both children, suggesting that formula would be more convenient and would allow other family members to help with feeding. She disapproved of my relaxed approach to schedules, preferring rigid routines that she believed would create more disciplined children. She even commented on my choice of children's books, arguing that I was selecting stories that were too advanced or too simple for their developmental stages. What made these interactions particularly challenging was Constance's ability to frame every criticism as helpful advice. She never raised her voice or expressed anger directly. Instead, she'd speak in the measured tones of someone who'd spent decades managing teenage behavior, using phrases like, "You might want to consider," or, "In my experience," that made disagreement feel childish and ungrateful. The breaking point came during Ivy's 5th birthday party, an event I'd been planning for weeks. I'd chosen a garden party theme, transforming our small backyard into a magical space with fairy lights, pastel balloons, and a butterfly craft station. The guest list included 8 of Ivy's friends from preschool, their parents, and close family members. I'd spent hours preparing homemade decorations, baking a 3-layer vanilla cake with buttercream flowers, and creating goodie bags filled with small toys and books. The morning of the party, I felt a familiar mixture of excitement and anxiety. I wanted everything to be perfect for Ivy, but I also knew that Constance would be attending, and her presence always made me feel like I was being evaluated. I'd learned to anticipate her comments and prepare responses. But the constant vigilance was exhausting. Constance arrived 30 minutes early, carrying a large gift bag, and wearing the expression of someone who'd come to supervise rather than celebrate. She surveyed the decorations with the critical eye of someone inspecting a student's project, making small adjustments to balloon arrangements and questioning my choice of activities. When I explained that the children would be decorating butterfly wings and then having a parade around the yard, she frowned and suggested that the craft might be too messy and unstructured. Children need clear instructions and defined boundaries, she said, repositioning the craft supplies according to her own organizational system. Otherwise, they become overstimulated and difficult to manage. I felt my jaw tighten but forced a smile. I think they'll enjoy the creative freedom, I replied, trying to keep my voice light and confident. The first hour of the party went smoothly. The children were delighted with the butterfly wings activity, and their parents chatted comfortably while supervising the creative chaos. Ivy was radiant in her yellow sundress, moving between friends and activities with the natural authority of a birthday girl. Lincoln, not wanting to be left out, had appointed himself as the official helper, distributing crayons and offering unsolicited artistic advice to anyone who would listen. But as the afternoon progressed, I noticed Constance becoming increasingly agitated. She'd position herself near whatever activity was happening, making small corrections and suggestions that gradually undermined my role as the party's host. When one of the children spilled juice on the craft table, she immediately stepped in with paper towels and a lecture about being more careful. When another child needed help with the bathroom, she guided them inside before I could respond. The situation reached a crescendo during the cake ceremony. I'd planned to have the children gather in a circle on the grass while Ivy made her wish and blew out the candles. It was meant to be an intimate, magical moment that would create lasting memories for both Ivy and her friends. But as I lit the 5 candles and began to sing Happy Birthday, Constance suddenly stepped forward. "Camden, you need to move the children back," she announced loudly, her voice cutting through the song. "They're too close to the candles. Someone could get hurt." The singing stopped abruptly. 8 sets of parents' eyes turned toward me, waiting to see how I'd respond to this public correction. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. But I was trapped in a social situation where pushing back would create an even bigger scene. "They're fine, Constance," I said quietly, hoping to minimize the disruption. "I'm right here watching them." "No, they're not fine," she insisted, her voice gaining volume and authority. "As someone who's supervised thousands of children, I can tell you that this is unsafe. You need to create more space between the children and the open flames." She began physically moving the children backward, using her hands to guide them away from the cake, while explaining fire safety rules in the tone she'd once used with difficult teenagers. The children, confused and slightly frightened by the sudden change in atmosphere, looked between Constance and me with wide eyes. "Constance, please," I said, my voice shaking with the effort to remain calm. "I've got this handled." "Clearly you don't," she replied, her years of administrative authority flowing through her words. "I've been watching you all afternoon, and your supervision is inconsistent." These children need clearer boundaries and more structured activities. Birthday parties aren't just about fun. They're about teaching responsibility and safety. The silence that followed was deafening. Every parent at the party was witnessing my public humiliation, watching as my mother-in-law systematically dismantled my authority in front of my own daughter. Ivy stood frozen beside her birthday cake, her small face reflecting confusion and distress as the adults around her engaged in what felt like a power struggle. "You're embarrassing me," I whispered, hoping that acknowledging the social dynamic might make her stop. "I'm protecting these children," she replied, her voice now carrying the full weight of her professional experience. "Someone has to take responsibility for their safety, since you seem more concerned with appearances than with actual supervision." The words hit me like a physical blow. In front of my daughter, my friends, and my community, this woman had just declared me an inadequate mother who prioritized vanity over my child's well-being. The accusation was so devastating and unfair that I felt something fundamental shift inside me. Marcus, who'd been inside getting more napkins, returned to find the party in a state of uncomfortable suspension. He immediately sensed the tension and looked between his mother and me with the expression of someone who'd walked into a minefield. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Your mother thinks I'm an unsafe parent," I said, my voice barely controlled. "She's been correcting me all afternoon, and now she's telling everyone that I can't properly supervise my own daughter's birthday party." Marcus looked at his mother, who straightened her shoulders and prepared to defend her position. "I simply pointed out some safety concerns," she said, her tone suggesting that I was overreacting to reasonable feedback. The children were too close to the candles, and Camden seemed overwhelmed by the situation. "I wasn't overwhelmed," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "I was managing everything perfectly fine until you decided to take over." Several parents began making polite excuses and gathering their children, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding around them. I watched my carefully planned party dissolve into an awkward situation that would likely become neighborhood gossip. Ivy, still standing beside her unsung cake, began to cry. "Now look what you've done," Constance said, moving toward Ivy with the intention of comforting her. "You've upset the birthday girl with your emotional reaction." "Don't touch her," I said, the words coming out with more force than I'd intended. "You've done enough damage today." Marcus stepped between us, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Let's everyone take a breath and figure this out calmly," he said, but his attempt at mediation felt weak and ineffective. "There's nothing to figure out," I replied, my voice gaining clarity and resolve. "Your mother has made it clear that she doesn't respect me as a parent or as a person. She spent 4 years undermining my confidence and questioning my decisions. And today she did it in front of everyone who matters to me." The remaining parents gathered their children and left quickly, offering hurried thanks and promises to call later. Within minutes, our backyard was empty except for family members and the remnants of a ruined celebration. Ivy clung to my leg, still crying, while Lincoln watched from the safety of the porch steps. "I think everyone should go home," I said, my voice steady despite the emotional chaos I felt inside. "This party is over." Constance looked genuinely surprised by my reaction. "Camden, you're being dramatic," she said, her tone suggesting that my upset was unreasonable. "I was only trying to help." "Your help has destroyed my daughter's birthday," I replied. "I don't want to hear any more explanations or justifications. I just want you to leave." Marcus looked torn between supporting his wife and managing his mother's feelings. "Mum, maybe you should head home," he said quietly. "We'll talk about this tomorrow." "Fine," Constance said, her voice carrying wounded dignity. "But I want you to know that I was only thinking about the children's safety. I'm sorry that Camden took my concerns so personally." Even in her departure, she managed to frame the situation as my overreaction to her reasonable input. She gathered her purse and walked toward the front gate, her posture communicating that she was the victim of unfair treatment after she left. Marcus and I sat on the porch steps while the children played quietly in the yard. The party decorations hung limply in the evening air, a cheerful backdrop to our family's dysfunction. She humiliated me, I said, my voice hollow with exhaustion. In front of everyone who matters to me, she made me look incompetent and irresponsible. She wasn't trying to hurt you, Marcus replied, but his defense sounded automatic and unconvincing. She genuinely believes she was helping. Her intentions don't matter, I said, finally articulating something I've been feeling for years. The impact is what matters, and the impact is that I feel constantly criticized and undermined in my own home. What do you want me to do? He asked, and I heard the frustration in his voice. She's my mother. I can't just cut her out of our lives. You can stop making excuses for her, I replied. You can stop pretending that her behavior is acceptable just because she's family. That night, after the children were in bed, I sat in our living room surrounded by the birthday presents that Ivy hadn't had a chance to open properly. The entire celebration had been overshadowed by Constance's need to establish her authority, and I felt a deep sadness for the memories that should have been created but were lost instead. I began to think about the pattern of interactions I tolerated for 4 years. Every family gathering had included moments where Constance subtly undermined my parenting decisions. Every visit to their house involved corrections and suggestions that left me feeling inadequate. Every phone call with Marcus included updates about his mother's concerns about our household management. I realized that I'd been allowing this dynamic to continue because I'd been focused on keeping the peace rather than protecting my own dignity. I'd accepted the role of the grateful daughter-in-law. You should be thankful for experienced guidance, even when that guidance felt more like systematic criticism. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called revenge treats, a service I'd heard about through a friend who'd used them to document her own family's toxic dynamics. They specialize in helping people create elegant, dignified responses to family manipulation and boundary violations. When I explained the situation to their consultant, she immediately understood the pattern of behavior I'd been experiencing. This is emotional manipulation disguised as helpful concern, she said. Your mother-in-law has been systematically undermining your confidence as a parent while maintaining plausible deniability about her intentions. I don't want to be vindictive, I said. I just want her to understand that her behavior has consequences. Most elegant revenge is success, she replied. You're going to show her that you don't need her help or approval by thriving without her involvement. The plan was simple but powerful. I would hire the most qualified, experienced nanny in Burlington and create a household routine that was so well organized and professionally managed that no one could question my children's care. Then I would gradually limit Constance's access to our family while documenting the positive changes that occurred without her interference. I spent the next week researching childcare services and interviewing candidates. I found Marina, a former Montessori teacher with a master's degree in early childhood development who'd worked with diplomatic families in Washington, D.C. She spoke 3 languages, had training in child psychology, and came with references from families who'd used her services for multiple years. Marina's approach to childcare was everything that Constance claimed to value, but had never actually implemented. She created structured learning activities that were also engaging and fun. She established routines that gave the children security, while allowing flexibility for creativity and exploration. She taught them conflict resolution skills, encouraged independent problem-solving, and documented their developmental progress. With detailed observations, the transformation in our household was immediate and dramatic. Ivy and Lincoln flourished under Marina's guidance, becoming more confident, articulate, and emotionally regulated, our home became a place of learning and growth rather than anxiety and criticism. I was able to focus on my work and my relationship with Marcus without constantly worrying about whether I was meeting someone else's standards. When Constance called to arrange her usual weekly visit, I informed her that our schedule had changed. "We've hired a nanny who's helping us establish some new routines," I said. "We'll need to coordinate any visits in advance." "A nanny?" she repeated, her voice carrying surprise and what sounded like hurt. I thought I was helping with the children. "Your help has been appreciated," I replied, using the diplomatic language I'd learned from Marina. "But we've decided to work with a professional who has specific training in early childhood development. I have 37 years of experience working with children," she said, her professional credentials coming forward as a defense. "With teenagers," I corrected gently. "Marina specializes in ages 2 through 6, which is exactly what we need right now." The conversation ended with Constance accepting the change, but clearly feeling displaced and confused. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that I'd finally established a boundary, and sadness that our relationship had deteriorated to the point where professional intervention felt necessary. Over the following weeks, I began documenting the positive changes in our family dynamic. Ivy's confidence increased dramatically when she wasn't receiving constant corrections about her behavior. Lincoln developed better communication skills without someone constantly interrupting his attempts at self-expression. Marcus and I had more relaxed conversations about parenting decisions without feeling like we were being monitored and evaluated. Marina's presence also provided me with validation that my instincts as a mother had been correct all along. She confirmed that my approach to discipline was appropriate, that my children were developmentally on track, and that the activities I'd been planning were well suited to their ages and interests. "Your children are delightful," she told me after her first week. "They're curious, well-behaved, and clearly loved. Whoever has been telling you otherwise hasn't been paying attention." When Constance asked to visit for Lincoln's 3rd birthday, I agreed but established clear parameters. "Marina will be here to help coordinate activities," I said, "and I'd appreciate it if you could let me handle the party planning and execution." "I don't understand why you need a stranger to help with your own children," she said, her voice carrying frustration and confusion. "Marina isn't a stranger," I replied. "She's a professional who understands child development and has helped us create a more structured environment for the children." The birthday party was a revelation. With Marina's support, I felt confident and capable in ways I hadn't experienced in years. The activities were well organized, the children were engaged and happy, and the parents complimented the thoughtful planning and execution. Constance, meanwhile, seemed diminished and uncertain. Without her usual role as the family's childcare expert, she struggled to find her place in the celebration. She made a few attempts to offer corrections and suggestions, but Marina's professional presence and my newfound confidence made her interventions seem unnecessary and inappropriate. "The children seem very well behaved," she said to me at one point, her tone suggesting surprise. "They've always been well behaved," I replied. "Marina has just helped us create more consistent routines that support their natural development." After the party, Marcus commented on how relaxed and happy I'd seemed. "You look like you were actually enjoying yourself," he said. "I haven't seen you that comfortable at a family gathering in years." I felt supported, I replied. Marina's presence meant that I didn't have to worry about being criticized or second-guessed. I could just focus on celebrating Lincoln and making sure everyone had a good time. "Maybe we should have hired help sooner," he said, and I heard regret in his voice. "Maybe we should have established boundaries sooner," I replied, and we both understood that we were talking about more than just childcare arrangements. As the months passed, Constance's visits became less frequent and more structured. She'd call to arrange specific times to see the children, and I'd coordinate with Marina to ensure that the visits were positive and productive. Without her constant presence and criticism, I began to rediscover my confidence as a mother and as a person. The most significant change was in my relationship with Marcus. Without the constant stress of managing his mother's interference, we were able to focus on our own family's needs and goals. We made decisions together without feeling like we needed to justify them to an external authority. We celebrated the children's achievements without worrying about whether they met someone else's standards. Marcus also began to see his mother's behavior more clearly. When she made her usual comments about our household management or parenting decisions, he started questioning her feedback instead of automatically accepting it. He realized that many of her suggestions were based on outdated information or personal preferences rather than actual expertise. "I never noticed how much she criticized you," he told me one evening after a particularly tense phone call with his mother. "I thought she was just being helpful, but I can see now that it was constant and undermining. I tried to tell you," I replied without accusation. "But it was hard to explain because she was so subtle about it." "I should have listened better," he said. "I should have protected you from that." The conversation marked a turning point in our marriage. Marcus began setting boundaries with his mother, supporting my decisions publicly, and prioritizing our nuclear family's needs over his mother's comfort. It wasn't easy for him, challenging. A parent's authority required courage and clarity that he'd never had to develop before. Constance, meanwhile, struggled to adapt to her reduced role in our lives. She'd call with urgent concerns about the children's development or safety, only to be told that Marina had already addressed those issues. She'd offer to help with activities or events only to learn that we'd already made professional arrangements. "I feel like I'm being replaced," she told Marcus during one of their conversations. "You're not being replaced," he replied. "But Camden and I are the children's parents, and we need to make decisions that work for our family." "I just want to help," she said, her voice carrying genuine hurt. "Your help has been appreciated," he replied, using language he'd learned from watching me navigate these conversations. "But we need to establish some boundaries so that everyone can feel comfortable and respected." The most telling moment came during a family gathering at Gerald and Constance's house. The children were playing in the backyard while the adults visited on the porch. When Lincoln fell down and scraped his knee, I immediately moved to comfort him and assess the injury. "You should put ice on that," Constance said, starting to rise from her chair. "I've got it handled," I replied calmly, cleaning the scrape with supplies from the first aid kit I'd brought. "That ice will prevent swelling," she insisted, moving toward the kitchen. "Camden knows what she's doing," Marcus said firmly. "She's been handling these situations successfully." For 3 years, Constance stopped mid-stride, looking between Marcus and me with an expression of surprise and hurt. She sat back down without another word, but I could see that she was struggling to understand the shift in family dynamics. Later, she approached me privately. "I feel like I can't say anything without being told I'm wrong," she said, her voice carrying genuine confusion. "You can say anything you want," I replied, "but I need you to accept that Marcus and I are the decision makers for our children. Your input is welcome, but the final choices are ours." "I just want what's best for them," she said. "I know you do," I replied, "but what's best for them is having parents who feel confident and supported in their decisions. When you question everything we do, it undermines our authority and creates anxiety for everyone." "I never meant to undermine you," she said, and I heard sincerity in her voice. "I believe that," I replied. "But impact matters more than intention. The impact of constant criticism is that I felt incompetent and stressed, which affected my ability to be the mother I wanted to be." The conversation was painful but necessary. Constance began to understand that her behavior, however well-intentioned, had been damaging to our family dynamic. She started asking permission before offering suggestions and accepting our decisions without argument. The changes weren't immediate or perfect. Old patterns don't disappear overnight. And there were moments when Constance reverted to her supervisory role. But Marcus and I had developed the skills and confidence to address these situations directly. And respectfully, Marina continued to be an invaluable presence in our lives. Beyond her excellent childcare, she provided validation and support that helped me develop as a parent. She taught me techniques for managing difficult behaviors, strategies for encouraging learning and creativity, and ways to build my children's confidence and independence. "You're an excellent mother," she told me one day after watching me handle a challenging situation with patience and wisdom. "Your children are lucky to have someone who cares so much about their emotional and intellectual development." The affirmation meant more to me than she probably realized. After years of feeling criticized and inadequate, hearing professional validation of my parenting skills was deeply healing. As Ivy started kindergarten and Lincoln entered preschool, I felt proud of the foundation we'd built for their education and development. They were confident, curious children who approached new situations with enthusiasm and resilience. They communicated their needs clearly, showed empathy for others, and demonstrated the kind of emotional intelligence that would serve them well throughout their lives. The most rewarding aspect of the entire experience was watching my children develop their own relationship with their grandmother, free from the tension and anxiety that had previously characterized family interactions. Without the constant power struggles between Constance and me, she was able to focus on enjoying her grandchildren rather than correcting their parents. She began bringing age-appropriate books and educational games instead of management advice. She asked about their interests and activities instead of questioning our decisions. She celebrated their achievements without comparing them to her own standards or expectations. "The children seem more relaxed around me," she commented to Marcus one day. "Everyone's more relaxed," he replied. "When there's less conflict between the adults, the children feel safer and more comfortable." "I didn't realize my advice was creating conflict," she said. "It wasn't advice," he replied gently. "It was criticism. And criticism, even well-intentioned criticism, creates defensive reactions that make it hard for people to hear each other." The conversation represented growth for both of them. Constance began to understand how her communication style had affected our family, and Marcus developed the ability to have honest conversations with his mother about difficult topics. As I reflect on this experience, I realize that the most important lesson wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about the importance of protecting your own dignity and well-being. For years, I'd accepted treatment that made me feel small and inadequate, because I thought that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. But I learned that allowing someone to consistently undermine your confidence doesn't actually keep the peace. It creates a different kind of conflict, an internal conflict where you constantly question your own judgment and abilities. This type of conflict is particularly damaging because it affects your ability to be present and effective in your most important relationships. Hiring Marina wasn't really about proving a point to Constance. It was about creating an environment where I could thrive as a mother and a person. It was about surrounding myself with support and validation, instead of criticism and doubt. It was about investing in my family's well-being, instead of trying to manage someone else's need for control. The experience also taught me about the difference between helping and interfering. True help empowers the person receiving it, while interference undermines their confidence and autonomy. Marina's support made me feel more capable and confident, while Constance's help had made me feel inadequate and anxious. I learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're guidelines that help people interact with each other respectfully and safely. By establishing clear expectations about how we wanted to be treated, we created space for genuine relationships to develop instead of power struggles and resentment. Most importantly, I learned that I didn't need anyone's permission to protect my own well-being and that of my children. I didn't need to justify my decisions to prove their validity. I didn't need to accept criticism in order to be a good daughter-in-law or wife. The transformation in our family dynamic was so profound that friends and extended family members began commenting on the positive changes. People mentioned how much more relaxed and confident I seemed, how well-behaved and happy the children appeared, and how much stronger Marcus and I seemed as a couple. "You look like you're actually enjoying being a mother," my sister told me during a visit. "For a while there, you seemed stressed and overwhelmed whenever we talked about the kids." "I was stressed," I replied, "but not because of the children. I was stressed because I felt like I was constantly being evaluated and found wanting." "Cat must have been exhausting," she said. "It was," I replied, "but I learned that I don't have to accept that kind of treatment just because it comes from family." Today, as I write this story, Ivy is thriving in first grade and Lincoln is excited about starting pre-K. They're confident, articulate children who approach new challenges with curiosity and resilience. They have a loving relationship with their grandmother that's based on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than power struggles and anxiety. Marcus and I have developed a partnership based on trust and shared responsibility. We make decisions together, support each other's choices, and prioritize our family's needs over external expectations. We've learned to communicate more effectively and to address conflicts directly rather than avoiding them. Constance has gradually adapted to her new role in our lives. She's learning to offer support without taking over, to express concerns without demanding control, and to enjoy her grandchildren without criticizing their parents. The process hasn't been easy for her, but it's been necessary for everyone's well-being. Marina continues to be an important part of our family, providing excellent childcare and serving as a reminder that professional support can be invaluable for busy parents. She's helped us create systems and routines that support our children's development while reducing stress for everyone involved. The most significant change has been in my own sense of self-worth and confidence. I no longer question my every decision or seek validation from others for my parenting choices. I trust my instincts, seek professional guidance when needed, and feel proud of the mother I've become. I've learned that the most elegant revenge isn't dramatic or vindictive. It's simply living well and protecting your own peace. By creating boundaries, seeking support, and refusing to accept treatment that undermined my confidence, I was able to build the kind of family life I'd always wanted. The experience taught me that sometimes the people who claim to love us most are the ones who cause the most damage to our self-esteem and well-being. But it also taught me that we have the power to change these dynamics by refusing to accept what isn't acceptable and by investing in our own growth and happiness. I hope that sharing this story will help other parents who might be struggling with similar situations. Family dynamics can be incredibly complex, and it's not always easy to identify when help becomes interference or when concern becomes criticism. But I've learned that our first responsibility is to protect our own well-being and that of our children, even when that means disappointing people we care about. The children deserve parents who feel confident and capable, relationships that are based on respect and trust, and a home environment that supports their growth and happiness. Sometimes achieving these goals requires making difficult decisions and setting boundaries that might initially cause discomfort for others. But the long-term benefits of these changes have been immeasurable. Our family is stronger, happier, and more connected than ever before. We've learned to communicate more effectively, to support each other's growth, and to prioritize what truly matters in our lives. Looking back on Ivy's 5th birthday party, I can see that it was a turning point that forced me to confront dynamics I'd been avoiding for years. The public humiliation I experienced that day was painful, but it also provided the clarity I needed to make necessary changes. I realize now that Constance's behavior wasn't really about childcare or safety. It was about maintaining control and authority in a situation where she felt displaced and uncertain. New parents represented a threat to her role as the family's expert on child rearing, and her criticism was a way of reasserting her importance and relevance. Understanding this dynamic doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does help explain why boundary setting was so important. By hiring Marina and establishing clear expectations about our family's needs, we were able to create space for healthier relationships to develop. The experience has also strengthened my marriage in ways I hadn't expected. Marcus learned to prioritize our nuclear family's needs over his mother's comfort, and I learned to communicate my needs more clearly and directly. We developed better conflict resolution skills and a deeper understanding of each other's perspectives. We've also become more intentional about the kind of family culture we want to create. We want our children to grow up feeling supported and valued, with parents who model healthy communication and mutual respect. We want them to understand that love doesn't require accepting treatment that undermines their confidence or well-being. As they get older, I hope they'll remember the lessons we've learned about boundaries, self-respect, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who support your growth and happiness. I hope they'll have the courage to protect their own peace and the wisdom to seek help when they need it. The investment we made in professional childcare has paid dividends in ways we never expected. Beyond the excellent care Marina provides, her presence has helped us develop better systems, communication skills, and confidence in our abilities as parents. She's been a teacher, mentor, and advocate for our family's well-being. Most importantly, I've learned that seeking help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom and self-awareness. Parents who recognize their limitations and seek appropriate support are more likely to create positive environments for their children than those who struggle alone out of pride or fear of judgment. The changes in our family dynamic have been noticed by our extended community as well. Teachers at Ivy's school have commented on her confidence and communication skills. Lincoln's preschool director mentioned his emotional intelligence and ability to resolve conflicts with peers. Friends have remarked on how much more relaxed and present I seem during social gatherings. You used to look like you were waiting for someone to tell you that you were doing something wrong, my friend Natalie observed during a recent coffee date. Now you look like you actually believe in yourself. Her observation was more accurate than she probably realized. For years, I had been unconsciously seeking approval and validation from others, particularly from Constance, because I'd internalized the message that my instincts weren't trustworthy. The constant criticism had eroded my confidence to the point where I second-guessed every decision and questioned every choice. Working with Marina helped me rediscover my natural parenting instincts and develop professional skills that enhanced my effectiveness. She taught me developmental milestones, age-appropriate expectations, and evidence-based strategies for common challenges. But more importantly, she helped me understand that I have been doing many things right all along. Your children are securely attached, emotionally regulated, and developmentally appropriate, she told me during one of our regular check-ins. Those outcomes don't happen by accident. They're the result of consistent, loving, responsive parenting. The validation was transformative. I began to see my parenting journey not as a series of mistakes and corrections, but as a process of growth and learning that was fundamentally on track. This shift in perspective affected every aspect of my relationship with my children and my confidence in making decisions about their care. I also learned to distinguish between constructive feedback and destructive criticism. Marina would point out areas for improvement by offering specific suggestions and explaining the reasoning behind them. She'd acknowledge what was working well before addressing what could be enhanced. Her approach made me feel supported and empowered rather than criticized and diminished. The contrast with Constance's approach was stark. Where Marina offered education and options, Constance had delivered judgment and directives. Where Marina built on existing strengths, Constance had focused on perceived deficits. Where Marina respected my role as the parent, Constance had tried to supersede my authority. Understanding these differences helped me develop better communication skills for all of my relationships. I learned to express my needs clearly, to ask for specific types of support, and to address concerns directly, rather than allowing resentment to build over time. Marcus and I began having more productive conversations about parenting decisions, household management, and family priorities. Instead of feeling defensive about his mother's input, I felt confident in my ability to evaluate suggestions and make informed choices about what would work for our family. "I like who you've become," he told me one evening as we watched the children play in the backyard. "You seem more like yourself than you have in years." "I feel more like myself," I replied. I'd forgotten what it felt like to trust my own judgment and feel confident in my decisions. "I'm sorry it took so long for me to understand what was happening," he said. "I should have seen how much my mother's comments were affecting you." "We both did the best we could with what we understood at the time," I replied. "The important thing is that we figured it out and made changes." The conversation reflected the growth in our relationship. We'd learned to address conflicts directly, to support each other's development, and to prioritize our family's needs over external expectations. We'd become partners in the truest sense, working together to create the kind of home environment we wanted for our children. As the months passed, I noticed that my relationship with Constance had evolved into something more sustainable and respectful. She'd learned to ask permission before offering suggestions and to accept our decisions without argument. She'd begun bringing activities and gifts that supported our family's interests, rather than imposing her own preferences. "I brought some new puzzles for the children," she said during a recent visit. Marina mentioned that Ivy enjoys problem-solving activities, and I thought Lincoln might like the shapes and colors. The shift in her approach was remarkable. Instead of criticizing our choices or questioning our methods, she was supporting our goals and respecting our authority as parents. She'd learned to work within the boundaries we'd established, rather than trying to override them. "The children seem very happy and well-adjusted," she commented as we watched them play together. "You and Marcus have done a wonderful job raising them." The compliment meant more to me than she probably realized, after years of feeling criticized and inadequate. Hearing genuine appreciation for my parenting felt like a gift. It also demonstrated that our boundary setting had created space for more positive interactions to develop. "Thank you," I replied. "Marina has been incredibly helpful in supporting our goals and teaching us new strategies." "She seems very knowledgeable," Constance said. "I can see why you wanted to work with a professional." The acknowledgement represented significant growth for her. She'd moved from seeing Marina as competition to recognizing her as a valuable resource for our family. She'd learned to appreciate professional expertise rather than feeling threatened by it. These changes didn't happen overnight, and there were moments when old patterns resurged. But Marcus and I had developed the skills and confidence to address these situations directly and respectfully. We've learned to redirect conversations that became critical and to reinforce boundaries that were being tested. The most rewarding aspect of the entire experience has been watching my children develop their own sense of confidence and self-worth. They've learned to express their needs clearly, to ask for help when they need it, and to trust their own judgment about what feels right for them. "Mommy, I don't like it when people tell me I'm doing something wrong when I'm not," Ivy said to me one day after a playdate where another parent had been overly corrective. "How did that make you feel?" I asked, pleased that she was able to articulate her experience. "It made me feel bad about myself," she replied. "Like I wasn't good enough." "That sounds really hard," I said. "What do you think you could do if something like that happens again?" "I could tell them that I'm doing my best, or I could ask you to help me," she said thoughtfully. The conversation demonstrated that she was developing the emotional intelligence and self-advocacy skills that would serve her well throughout her life. She was learning to trust her own perceptions and to seek support when needed, rather than automatically accepting criticism as valid. Lincoln, too, has developed remarkable confidence and communication skills. He expresses his feelings clearly, asks for help when he needs it, and shows empathy for others who are struggling. He's learned to problem solve independently while also understanding when adult support is necessary. I'm proud of how I handled that situation, he told me recently after successfully resolving a conflict with a friend. I used my words instead of getting upset. His self-awareness and pride in his own growth filled me with joy. He was learning to recognize his own capabilities and to feel confident in his ability to navigate challenging situations. Both children have developed strong relationships with Marina, who has become a trusted adult in their lives. She provides consistency and support while respecting our family's values and priorities. She's helped them develop academic skills, social competencies, and emotional regulation strategies that will benefit them throughout their lives. Marina helps me when I feel frustrated, Ivy explained to a friend who was visiting. She teaches me how to take deep breaths and think about what I really need. The fact that my children feel comfortable seeking support from trusted adults is one of the most important outcomes of our family's transformation. They're learning that asking for help is a sign of strength and wisdom, not weakness or failure. As I look toward the future, I feel optimistic about our family's trajectory. We've created a foundation of mutual respect, open communication, and shared responsibility that will support us through whatever challenges lie ahead. We've learned to prioritize our well-being and to make decisions based on our own values and goals, rather than external expectations. The experience has also strengthened my professional life. The confidence I've gained as a parent has translated into more assertive and effective communication in my work as a graphic designer. I'm better at setting boundaries with clients, asking for fair compensation, and advocating for my creative vision. You seem more confident in your work lately, my biggest client mentioned during a recent project review. Your designs have more boldness and clarity than before. I've been working on trusting my instincts more, I replied. I think that's reflected in everything I do. The comment reinforced my understanding that confidence in one area of life tends to support confidence in others. By learning to trust my judgment as a parent, I'd also learned to trust my professional expertise and creative vision. I've also become more involved in my community, volunteering at the children's schools and participating in local parenting groups. The connections I've made have provided additional support and validation for my parenting approach while also allowing me to share what I've learned with other families. Your story about setting boundaries with family members really resonated with me. A friend from my parenting group told me recently, I've been struggling with similar issues with my own mother-in-law. Sharing my experience has helped me realize that many parents face similar challenges with family dynamics and boundary setting. The feelings of inadequacy, criticism, and undermining that I experienced are unfortunately common, particularly among new parents who are still developing confidence in their abilities. The most important thing I learned, I told her, is that you don't have to accept treatment that makes you feel bad about yourself just because it comes from family. You have the right to protect your own well-being and that of your children. But how do you do that without causing family conflict? She asked. You can't control whether other people get upset about your boundaries, I replied. You can only control how you respond to their reactions. Sometimes protecting your peace means disappointing people who want to maintain the status quo. The conversation reminded me of how much I've grown in my understanding of healthy relationships and effective communication. I've learned that conflict isn't always bad, sometimes it's necessary for growth and positive change. As I think about the lessons I want to share with other parents, several key insights stand out. First, trust your instincts. You know your children better than anyone else, and your observations and concerns are valid. Seek professional guidance when needed, but don't let others override your fundamental understanding of what your children need. Second, boundaries are acts of love, not selfishness. When you protect, your own well-being. You're modeling healthy self-care for your children and creating space for more positive relationships to develop. People who truly care about you will respect your boundaries even if they don't initially understand them. Third, seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Professional support can provide validation, education, and practical strategies that enhance your effectiveness as a parent. Don't let pride or fear of judgment prevent you from accessing resources that could benefit your family. Fourth, you have the right to be treated with respect and dignity in all of your relationships. Family connections don't justify criticism, undermining, or controlling behavior. You can love someone while also refusing to accept treatment that damages your self-esteem and well-being. Finally, change is possible at any stage of life and any point in a relationship. The patterns that seem entrenched and unchangeable can be transformed through consistent boundary setting, clear communication, and mutual commitment to growth. The transformation in our family dynamic has been profound and lasting. We've created a home environment that supports everyone's growth and happiness, relationships that are based on respect and trust, and a family culture that values open communication and mutual support. Constance has become a beloved grandmother who brings joy and wisdom to our children's lives without undermining their parents' authority. Marcus has developed into a confident partner who supports our family's needs while maintaining healthy relationships with his extended family. Our children are thriving academically, socially, and emotionally, with strong foundations that will serve them throughout their lives. Most importantly, I've reclaimed my sense of self-worth and confidence as a mother, partner, and individual. I no longer question my every decision or seek validation from others for my choices. I trust my instincts, seek support when needed, and feel proud of the life we've built together. The investment we made in professional childcare and boundary setting has paid dividends in ways we never expected. Beyond the immediate benefits of excellent care and reduced stress, we've learned skills and developed relationships that will continue to serve us for years to come. As I conclude this story, I want to acknowledge that not every family situation will have such a positive resolution. Some relationships are too damaged or toxic to repair through boundary setting alone, but I believe that most family conflicts can be improved through honest communication, mutual respect, and consistent enforcement of healthy boundaries. The key is recognizing that you have the power to change the dynamics that aren't serving you and your family. You don't have to accept criticism, undermining, or controlling behavior just because it comes from relatives. You have the right to protect your own well-being and that of your children, even when doing so initially causes discomfort for others. The most elegant revenge isn't dramatic or vindictive. It's simply living well and refusing to accept what isn't acceptable. By creating boundaries, seeking support, and investing in your own growth and happiness, you can build the kind of family life you've always wanted. I hope that sharing this story will encourage other parents who might be struggling with similar situations. You deserve to feel confident and supported in your role as a parent. You deserve relationships that enhance your well-being rather than undermining it. You deserve to protect your own peace and that of your children. The journey from feeling criticized and inadequate to feeling confident and capable hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every difficult conversation and uncomfortable moment. Our family is stronger, happier, and more connected than ever before. And I'm grateful for the courage it took to make necessary changes. If you're facing similar challenges with family dynamics, boundary setting, or parenting confidence, I encourage you to seek support. Trust your instincts, and remember that you have the power to create positive change in your life. The investment in your own well-being and that of your children is always worthwhile, regardless of how others might initially respond. Have you ever been betrayed by the people closest to you? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it.